What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Feed to Embiid. I am your host, Austin Krell, along with the video extraordinaire, the celebrity himself, Mr. Kate T-shirt, stay solid, baby, Brock Landis. Brock, how has the last week been for you?
It's been cool, man. This is a constant grind. So I kind of lose track of the days. I just go by when the Sixers play and when I need to put content out by. I'm sure you're working with the same schedule, but I got a cool little setup going on. You can't see anything right now, but I got a Rodecaster Pro. Let me see if I can play around here. So that's what the mixing board looks like.
Wow. Okay. That's very
pretty cool, high tech, and the mic right here.
Upper echelon right there. It's good stuff.
It's heavy. So what happened was we're going to talk about the Utah-Philly game. But I uploaded that video. I worked on it for like 16 straight hours. I'm not even kidding. I sat down from the time that game started, got a live tweet, then everything that comes after. So I was working on that video, a 15-minute video, for probably 16 hours, no joke. When I put the video out, it got really good reviews. People liked it. It was my most viewed, my most liked breakdown I've posted, but there were 7 dislikes. Now, I'm not tripping about the dislikes, but what happens is when I post, I usually get 1, 2, maybe 3 dislikes. What's up, BB? Stay solid. There were 7, which is concerningly high for my content. So I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Jazz fans.
I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's the Jazz fans, and they're in the comments ripping my content to shreds. They're like, oh, you're a piece of shit Sixers stan. Your drawings suck. Don't use crayons. Be more professional. So they're holding me to this real high standard. And I thought, you know what? These goofballs out in Utah might be right. They might be right. So they expedited what had to happen. I needed to upgrade the audio. I needed a mixing board. I need to get better with the editing. I need to take different angles. So these Jazz fans that dislike the video and commented, they really just expedited the process. So now I'm taking my content to a new level, and I'll have a care package out by Thursday. That's a Ben Simmons comp to Magic Johnson, Scottie Pippen, and Rajon Rondo. So that'll be side-by-side film and numbers for that entire video, and also a trade deadline candidate and buyout market candidate options video for the Philadelphia 76ers coming out by Thursday for their first game back. But Austin, I'm doing well, bro. I appreciate you asking me. How about you?
Wow. First of all, I don't know what. Well, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't have done that. If you wanted to do it. But it should not have been the Jazz fans, the salty Jazz fans, sending you over the edge.
Oh, they sped the process up. My Sixers family, they were content with my content, but the Jazz fans, they exposed a weakness, I should say. So
would you say that you went brazy on that purchase?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't, especially because it was my dad that purchased it too. So yes. Hats off to Mr. Landis. I appreciate it.
Landis, that's right. The head coach.
For words too. So
you have Coach Lynham and you have Coach Landis.
Yeah, exactly. Tier 1 and Tier 2.
That's right. So we got a lot to discuss today. Obviously, the Sixers, even though it's a little bit past its shelf life, the Sixers pull off one of the wins of the year for them, or one of the marquee wins of their season. Obviously, you have the LA win with Tobias Harris knocking down the game winner, but this game was something else. Embiid 40 and 19. Ben was just locking defensively. Mitchell ended up with like 33 points on 34 shots. It's not that impressive when you need 34 shots to get 33 points. I'm sorry, like. It's a nice number, 33 points. Not nice. It's 34 shots to get there. It's not good. I just thought they showed tremendous resilience. Like when Embiid left the game for a little while, when they have that all bench lineup in, when Utah's just making every single 3 they take, they didn't get down and they just didn't let up. They kept their foot in the door. And then slowly but surely, you see that foot get a little stronger. It's pushing the door a little bit further open, and then suddenly they're right back in the game. And it's if you think about it from like a mathematical standpoint, it's really, 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 really hard to win in the NBA when you get outshot from 3 by 13 shots. That's 39.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, The Sixers went 1 for 8, only 8 3-pointers attempted in the first half. And altogether, I think they finished the game at like 33% from beyond the arc. But
it was 8 of 25.
You talk about that mathematical significance in the modern NBA. If a team has a 39-point advantage off of 3-pointers, it's almost a death wish. It's like the game's over at that point. But a lot of really good things happen for Philadelphia in this game. Now, what did we see that we knew? If the Sixers have space, they're impossible to match up with. I think they're the most difficult team in the NBA at the moment, and that's without a dead-eye consistent three-point splasher to match up with in the NBA, because you've got the Lakers, right? Where, okay, you need to match up with LeBron and you need to match up with AD. But if you look at Boston, not really physical mismatches. If you look at Brooklyn, really one physical mismatch with KD. If you look at the Clippers, you could argue maybe 1 or 2 physical mismatches with PG and Kawhi. The Suns, not really any physical mismatches. So when you look at all of these contending teams, there's basketball mismatches, but none of them have 3 physical mismatches. And I say that because you've got Embiid, who's 7 feet, 7'1", 7'2", whatever. No center can guard him. He's the most unguardable player at his position, and I'd argue in the league. So you've got Embiid that a defense has to match up with, and more often than not, teams are going to double that. You've got Ben Simmons, 6'10", who handles the ball, and he's one of the best passers in the NBA, one of the best players at getting downhill and attacking in the NBA, a ferocious rebounder, plays hard every possession. So you've got to physically match up with Simmons at 6'10", but it's harder than matching up with just a 4 because, like I said, Simmons handles the ball. So now the question is, do you put a point guard on Ben Simmons? Probably not, because he's going to capitalize and attack that every time. So you've got to use a different defender, a 3 or a 4, and put him on Simmons, who's handling. So now you've got Embiid and Simmons. Okay, well, the Lakers have LeBron and AD, but now the Sixers have a 6'8" Tobias Harris, who's a guaranteed 20 a game on usually 50% shooting, who you've got to match up with. So those are 3 players physically that you look at the matchup and you're like, shit, we don't have 3 players to match up with them. So that's when teams double Joe. That's when teams double Embiid. That's when teams double Ben. But in space, unstoppable. And that's how the Sixers got their buckets. They break the game down, so there's a ton of production 2-man game. There's a ton of production executing the playbook, breaking the game down to a 3-on-3. But here's what was huge, right? The bench got outscored, and they blew a lead, or I think they expanded a deficit in the first half. But in the second half, Austin, the Sixers bench took an 11-point deficit and turned it into a 1-point deficit for the time that the Sixers starters, at least 3 of them, came back into the game. And that is massive because the Sixers were able to keep this a game the entire time despite that 39-point advantage for Utah from beyond the arc. And they ultimately were able to win because of the spacing. The bench brought them back. The spacing got him a dub. Toby had 11 of the Sixers' 13 points in OT. They went to him for 4 straight possessions, and he got a bucket on all 4 possessions. He has space. He generates a mismatch. He capitalizes on the mismatch. It's as simple as that. So for me, a super encouraging win. I saw a lot of good things offensively and defensively. I mean, listen, Donovan Mitchell got clamped again. So Simmons in this month, in the month of what month is it? It's March now, right? Okay.
February going into March.
In February, he clamped Devin Booker. Well, he didn't clamp Devin Booker. He got dropped off by Devin Booker. But in February, he clamped Luka, he clamped Dame, and he clamped Donovan Mitchell twice. Donovan Mitchell, 5 of 15 against Simmons, 2 of 8 from 3. That's 33% from the field, 28%, I believe, from 3. And in the final 8 minutes of play, the most important 8 minutes of the game, the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter and 5 in OT, Mitchell went 0 for 9 from the field and had 2 turnovers. When it mattered, the Sixers locked it down. They took Utah's best player out of the game the time it mattered most. And Rudy Gobert, the People's Defensive Player of the Year, got 17 buckets dropped on his head. Embiid, he dropped them off. Ben Simmons put a couple buckets on his head. And Tobias Harris definitely put a few buckets on his head. Listen, if you do that to the league's most feared defensive player, Rudy Gobert, you can beat anybody. And this just proved that Rudy Gobert's not the deep one.
Did you say Rudy Gobert?
Rudy Gobert. That's who played the Sixers. That was Utah's center against Philly. Rudy Gobert.
I like it. I thought what was there were 2 things that I really liked about the game is that, number one, Doc didn't give in to that bench unit and didn't say, like, all right, screw it, they can't do this. he stuck with his guns, and even if it doesn't work, I do kind of respect that, even if it does fail like 9 times out of 10. But I thought it was a really big moment for them in that third quarter to be able to stay in it, and actually get the lead. And they think it was a bizarre sequence. Like Dwight hits a three.
In Gobert's mitt.
Strokes a three, and then Korkmaz makes a floater. Korkmaz never makes floaters. He makes a floater there, and it was like a sky ball off of a tough angle, and he just knocked it down. Didn't need glass. Just it was on net. And then Mike Scott's coming in, and they're going back and forth with threes, and it was really just a crazy sequence of events in that third, fourth quarter. But the other thing that I was kind of like impressed by, in a sense, usually the game plan is going to be to make Gobert defend in space because he's pretty heavy-footed. His wingspan really is more effective around the rim. If you get him reaching with his hands, you could probably draw fouls on the reach from him because of his wingspan is makes it so easy for him to sort of like fall back into that on the feet. And I still think they didn't make Gobert defend in space really that much, and then Embiid still crushed him. So Joel beat him at his own game, really. And I thought that was a really dominant display. There were a couple plays in that game with Joel, just the play where he just bowls Rudy right the hell over, knocks him on his ass, and he goes like skidding across like penguins do on ice. Or whatever the hell, I don't know, snow, I don't know. But he was clearly no match. And then Joel hit Strokes the game-tying three. It was so like nonchalant, just like, oh, I got 5 seconds. I'm going to step back and knock this in your net. Yeah.
That was a crazy shot. And I know people in Philadelphia understand the significance of what's happening with Embiid, and I guess nationally they recognize it too. But what Embiid's doing is extremely unprecedented. I mean, you've got a center who, like I said, you call him 7 feet, 7'1", 7'2", whatever. The weight is more important to me, right? Because Embiid is like 270, 280 pounds. I mean, I'm guesstimating. But the only other players that can make that shot, or at least shoot 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 80% plus from the line, are like the Kevin Durant's of the league. And there's not many of them. Now they're 7 feet and slim, like the Kevin Durant's, the Brandon Ingrams. They're 7 feet and slim. Embiid is heavy. He's bigger than almost every center in the league. I mean, he looks centers, especially Rudy Gobert, just look like mismatches. And these are grown men. He's emasculating grown men with the basketball. And it's just crazy that you've got a center one-on-one in space that can really give you a bucket at all three levels. He can cross you up and hit a three. He can pull up anywhere from within the perimeter and hit a J with 50, 60% accuracy. And if he gets anywhere near the paint, it's over. It's a bucket or a foul. And I think the same is applicable to a lesser degree for Tobias Harris, and even further for Ben Simmons to a much lesser degree because there's no perimeter shooting. But anything within the perimeter and a one-on-one for the Sixers is a bucket or a foul. I'd say 7 out of 8 times. 7 out of 10 times. 7 out of 8. What the fuck? 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10.
After the game, of course, that the Jazz start complaining about the foul calls and stuff like that. I generally think the officiating is terrible across the entire sport. Like I think it's been really, 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 really bad this year. I was texting with an agent about this, and he was like, "I actually think they've done a pretty good job." I was like, "Really? Okay, interesting." And he kind of like brought up like they have to travel commercial flights. It's not as easy as it looks to come in there in these environments and like make these split judgment calls. But when you're running around, like a chicken in with your head cut off in the airport trying to get the flight to flight. So I get it, but they still have to be better because they're just not good enough right now. But I thought like dog, what are you talking about? You guys fouled the hell out of Joel. There were a number of possessions I saw where Joel got his feet tangled up with Jazz, or they had little subtle jabs that made him miss. And so I thought it was generally not a terribly officiated game. This whole narrative about how people don't like us and all that shit, I think it's just so tired. It's such a tired narrative.
Your dog likes you, bro. Your dog wants you to feed him. What the hell? What do you got going on over there? Your dog wants to go for a walk.
Dinner's in the other room.
It's at the wrong time.
Dinner's in the other room. We're good. We're good.
To your point with the officiating, I'm. Go ahead.
It's a cop out because they made 13 more threes. 13 more threes. They're the best team in the West, purportedly. They had that game, and they had their foot on the Sixers' throats from basically the 8-minute mark of the first quarter up until the middle of the fourth quarter. There was no excuse for the Jazz to lose that game. They had that game in the bag, and they let it go themselves. So I don't want to hear about the officiating. It's been terrible for everybody this year. But when you make 13 more threes and you lose the game, whose fault really is it? Come on.
Exactly. I'm not an officiating complainer. I really don't care about the officiating. I respect their hustle, right? I don't know what it takes to be an NBA official. But to your point about what the agent said, I'm sure all that's tough, but at the same time, what environment? They're playing 2K sounds on the game board. There's no one in the stadium. How are you missing calls? There were bad calls both ways. There were no calls both ways. But like you said, Utah had a plus 39 advantage off of three-pointers in this game. Philly only made one in the first half, and it was the Sixers' second unit that made this a game in the second half. They brought an 11-point lead to just one. So it's not like the officiating was so bad that determined the outcome of the game. Late, there were some bad no calls, and it went both ways, but ultimately, I don't really think that determined the outcome of this game.
For sure. Now, before we get into before we get into the All-Star, some words from our sponsors.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 21 now. I turned 21 in December. So once COVID gets situated and everything, I'm sure I'll be out clubbing and be at bars with Austin Krell. But for now, I just got a shotgun on my own time. And when I'm talking about shotgunning, I'm talking about using this tool to shotgun beer. If you want to increase your shotgunning time at parties, you got to check them out at the King Cobra. The King Cobra is a shotgunning tool that makes the perfect shotgunning hole in under a second. It's also a tab puller, vent puncher, and all fits on a keychain, just like this. For more information about the King Cobra, check them out on IG at the King Cobra Co. That's the King Cobra Co. And Cobra is spelled with a K for a 10% discount on all products. Enter the code TrustTheCobra10, all caps, one word. Pick yours up today.
Well done. So, go ahead.
Austin, we need to have a dialogue about the Defense Player of the Year. And I tweeted that there is no dialogue to be had because the conversation's over. And I felt passionately about this for a year now. I made a Simmons video on my YouTube a year ago, probably almost a year ago, as to why he's the next most feared defender in the NBA. And the points I were making was that, yeah, for 2 years, Rudy Gobert won the Defense Player of the Year, but Draymond Green and Kawhi Leonard kind of changed the standard. Prior forwards really hadn't won the Defense Player of the Year. I believe the last one to win it was Ron Artest. So the forward position doesn't really win the Defensive Player of the Year. It's usually a rim-protecting big. But as the modern NBA brings an evolution to the sport of basketball, as the game evolves, where it's more of an offensive game, and you watch the All-Star game, we'll talk about it, you've got guys pulling up from 75 feet. I mean, guys are just effortlessly shooting the ball from 60 feet.
They're making it, too.
They're making it. It's ridiculous. So in my opinion, the thing that should be rewarded most on defense is defensive versatility, not how well you protect the paint or how well you protect the rim. And don't get me wrong, Rudy Gobert is one of the best players in the league at that. He shuffles his feet really well for a player his size. He can switch onto guards around the perimeter. I mean, he has gotten cooked badly a few times, but he can switch. You alluded to the wingspan, so he's active in passing lanes. And he's a paint protector. He's not just a rim protector. He really changes everything defensively in the paint. But Ben Simmons, on the other hand, and even if you don't want to give the award to Ben Simmons, if you want to give it to somebody like Kawhi or somebody like Giannis, I think they might even be more deserving than a Rudy Gobert because of their defensive versatility. So Ben Simmons can really, I think he can match up with fives depending on the situation, but he can definitely match up with 1 through 4. So he can go out and defend any position for any situation. You need to take a 3-ball away. Okay, put Ben Simmons on the shooter. You want somebody to pick their dribble up at half court, you put Ben Simmons on that point guard. If you've got a 3 like LeBron James that has the ball in his hands with 10 seconds to play, Ben Simmons, Kawhi Leonard, those are the defenders you'd throw on LeBron James. You wouldn't put Rudy Gobert on LeBron James in that situation. And because of that, I think defensive versatility needs to be rewarded more than rim protection for the Defensive Player of the Year. And if you look at the most impactful, versatile defender in the NBA, it's Ben Simmons. So there's some defenders that are more impactful and some that are more versatile, but nobody is the combination of versatile and impactful better than Simmons. And the Basketball Index recently tweeted a graphic that justified that. So in my opinion, this dialogue about the Defensive Player of the Year, it's got to change because Gobert can have 100-plus blocks and he can change the game plan for an offense. But at the same time, you can put Simmons on positions 1 through 4 comfortably, positions 1 through 5 altogether, no matter what the situation is, and he'll get a stop. And this year, Gobert, he watched Simmons drop 42 on Utah. So you say, yeah, Simmons only went 3 of 8 against Gobert. It doesn't matter because you cannot throw Gobert on Simmons. So he just had to watch Simmons drop 42. Embiid put 40 up, and 20 of those points were on Gobert's head. Nikola Jokic dropped a 40 bomb on Utah. Zion Williamson dropped Gobert off 2 weeks ago. Ben Simmons, in the past month, in 1 month alone, clamped up 3 All-Stars. Donovan Mitchell, Luka, and Dame all were at the All-Star game, and Ben Simmons clamped all of them in a single month of basketball. So in my opinion, I just think we got to change the narrative about Defensive Player of the Year and start to, I guess, change our expectations a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. But I also am realistic, and I just don't think that Ben gets enough attention around the NBA to win it. And I think the narrative is probably in Gobert's favor. So I think Ben's the best defender in the NBA. I don't think it's a question anymore. But I do think Gobert probably will win his third. Just because all of this is narrative based. I'm not even convinced Embiid's going to win the MVP award. I think it's probably. I don't think it's probably, but I wouldn't shock me at all if LeBron, sneaks in there and gets it because it's narrative based. You have a lot of national pundits who have a lot of have big voices, and that Lakers get a lot of favorable coverage. And that means LeBron's going to benefit from it. That's just the truth of the matter. And right now, you look at the Jazz success. It's Mike Conley, number 1.
Hey, how's your boy doing the ASG? How'd he do?
3 points, 12 minutes. How'd your boy
6 in 12 minutes? He was. There's no point having him there.
Eric, how was your boy in the ASG? Huh?
Which one?
Exactly right. Yeah. And then there's Mitchell, and then there's Gobert. And Gobert is the anchor to the defensive end of the floor. And, that's the first thing you think of when you think of the Jazz is, number 1, you think of Mitchell leading the offense for whatever bizarre reason. And then you go to the defense and you think of Gobert. And I think that's just the way it is. I think
it is. But the thing that bothers me, and it is largely narrative driven, is that I don't care what defense. I'm a numbers guy. I don't care what defensive says. I don't care what opposing field goal percentage says. I don't care how many shots Rudy Gobert tests. He's a center. Of course he's going to contest a lot of shots because centers shoot a high volume of shots in the paint. I don't care what any of those numbers say. I'm looking at it from a straight basketball perspective. And I think a lot of analysts around the NBA should agree with me. It's like, from a basketball perspective, right? If you're Doc Rivers, who would you rather have in a situation to defend LeBron James with the game on the line? Rudy Gobert or Ben Simmons? It's Ben Simmons.
It's a
And the
silly question. You wouldn't even dare put Gobert in it.
Exactly. And if you think about it, all the players that are in a position to end games, Damian Lillard, Luka Doncic, Paul George, Jason Tatum, Trae Young, all the players that are in positions to end the game do it from either the guard position or the three position. But there's not a lot of centers that are shooting daggers, right? So you would want Simmons over Gobert on anybody 10 out of 10 times. That's my thought process from a basketball perspective. The most impactful defensive player, the defensive player of the year that should be recognized more than anybody, is the player that has the largest impact. So, yeah, Rudy Gobert is a paint protector, and he's really good defensively. He's great defensively. But I'm looking at it from a basketball perspective. He can only guard one position, and that position that he guards has dropped him off this year. Jokic did it. Joel Embiid did it. Zion Williamson did it. A whole host of centers have dropped off Rudy Gobert this season. That's just where my head's at.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see how it plays out. We still have a half season to go. Let's go over to the All-Star game now. So Ben, Joel test they test negative for COVID, but they're exposed to someone who had an inconclusive test. I think it was. They got their haircuts, before they left for Atlanta. PR confirmed to me that it happened before they left. I think Woj also reported that, but I think if you can, I think Ben put snap stories on the plane, so you can trace those back. You can kind of get a timeline from when it occurred. Obviously, they're hopeful that that they continue to test negative because that would give them a chance to play on Thursday. And if they test positive, I think you're looking at a situation where you're missing multiple games, and then they're in trouble. But they missed the All-Star game. I really wasn't watching it as much for them as I was for just like in general. I think it's always a fun way to pass.
You're watching for your boy Mike Conley.
I honestly watched for two people really.
Oh.
Steph and Dame. And I was in Steph's media session last night after the game. I was like this close to get to asking him a question. This close. But who did you think was going to win the skills challenge?
I had picked either Vooch or Luka. I was going with the European player pool. They're fundamentally sound guys over there.
I picked Vooch, and then it occurred to me like you have Sabonis and you have Vooch in the final, and I think like obviously maybe I tend to overthink things for the sake of being nuanced, but doesn't it kind of like speak to how much the game and the player have evolved when you have two bigs who are the finalists for a competition that includes dribbling between cones, making crisp passes, and making threes? Like that's how much the game has evolved. It used to be just a guard wing only competition. Now you have bigs winning it.
You got one of the greatest point guards of all time, Chris Paul, getting sent home, I think, for his, seventh or eighth time in the skills challenge, or fifth, something like that.
Something like that.
Sabonis won, and he was deserving of it. I'm glad Sabonis is getting the recognition he deserves because he's been grinding. He's been grinding his tail off. He came in this season stronger. He's committing less fouls, and offensively, he's just a problem. The thing is, it's tough to exist in a league as a great center when there's a guy Joel Embiid in it, especially in your own conference.
Right. I mean, obviously it's way easier when you don't have defenses there, but then explain how like Covington and whoever else missed those passes that were like
listen, I was actually really happy with what happened with Covington because regardless of if he won or not, I was really thrilled that he got to represent his HBCU.
For sure.
Altogether, the NBA, I thought they did a fantastic job just marketing and shedding light on HBCUs and giving them a platform and educating people because it was probably hundreds, I'd argue thousands of people that have no idea what an HBCU is, anything about HBCUs, everything like that. So not only for Robert Covington to be there and represent his HBCU, but altogether the NBA, they did a fantastic job now.
Yeah, I kind of like got the vibe that like the players really were all happy to convene there and take part in it because of that platform they were given to represent and spread the word and, embrace the love of all cultures and, people of different colors. And I kind of thought like maybe part of it was like, hey, if you guys, like the NBA was like, if you guys come and we do the game and we get these, we get the TV revenue, you have the full liberty to do whatever you want, be creative, represent in however way you want. And I thought it was a really good night for appreciating the historics of the culture for sure. And I was happy for Covington too, because he's always been thought of as a nice role player, and it was a cool moment for him to be there. I actually asked him about it after the event, and he gave me like a 5-minute monologue. So I thought it was a very authentic answer he gave me. Clearly, he thought about it for a lot, so it was good.
You joined the pressers from Zoom virtually. How many people were in them? Like, did it vary from player to player? It
was like 60 people, and you kind of like people that had like second or tertiary language. They got a lot of questions because you have that international reach. It's a good opportunity to build that international brand, right? Mm-hmm. So Luka was getting a ton. Like it'd be like, all right, the people in this language, you're next. People in Slovenian, people in Spanish, people in English. Like you just said, like they literally Lucas was literally like they did it by like a language group, so it was pretty cool. And it was like 60 people per Zoom. You have all the local beat. You have like I was in there with Mark Spears. I was in there with a bunch of different people. But really, it was really, 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 really cool stuff.
Yeah, not bad for your rookie year.
Yeah, and like the Zoom, it was like they were doing it one after the other. So it was like little segments of. It's like every 15 minutes a new grouping started. So it was like Luka, for example, it's like Luka, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. At this first interval, 15 minutes later, then it was like Steph, someone else. I didn't get to make it to LeBron, so I can imagine that was swarmed with people. But yeah, I thought it was funny with like the selection show, how like Gobert got picked last. And it kind of occurred to me like he has no all-star cachet. And there's nothing that speaks. There's nothing all-starry about him.
Yeah, that's the same for Mike Conley.
Nah, that's not true.
That's the same for Mike Conley. Both of them are boring as hell.
It is. But Mike Conley is a skilled player. But like for Gobert, he's one of those guys that has mastered the art of being an elite role player. And that has sort of opened up the window for him to be an all-star.
For him, Rudy Gobert?
Yeah.
Well, shit, that's an expensive role player. That's a $200 million role player.
You really don't like Rudy Gobert?
No, I don't. I think he's better than a role player. I think that's not giving Rudy Gobert the proper credit he deserves. But
think about his role. His role is to catch lobs at the rim, and his role is to be an anchor on the defensive end. That's by definition a role player.
Well, I think he's a little bit better than a role player. I mean, defensively, he's won the deep point twice, going on 3 times. And offensively,
was Draymond Green a role player?
Huh?
Is Draymond Green a role player?
Oh, he's Draymond Green. He's better than a role player too. We got to be careful with how we're using the word role player because I've seen it thrown around a lot this year, specifically with Ben Simmons too. I think people need to understand the difference between a role player and a hooper. Okay, a role player is there for a specific role that contributes to what the overarching goal is, what the team needs to do. A role player would be like a Danny Green, a Seth Curry, a Contavious Caldwell-Pope. I don't think a role player is anybody getting paid over $100 million. That's just a different tax bracket. You can't be a role player if you're in that tax bracket.
But like, couldn't you say you're someone who like, their sole responsibility is you have to catch lobs at the rim and then just block shots. That's a pretty confined and
it is, but at the same time, how many people around the league can do what Rudy Gobert does?
I'm not knocking him out, but what I'm saying is I think he's mastered his role and it's a limited one that is typically reserved for role players. But because he's mastered it and perfected it, it's turned him into an all-star. That's what I think.
Maybe, whatever the case is, Rudy Gobert is one of the most elite players in the league at making really cool things look really boring. Like, you've got James Harden, you've got all these incredible ball players, some world-class ball players, giving him lobs, setting him up perfectly, and he's just dunking it with one hand, dunking it with two hands, rolling to the basket.
I'm not bashing Rudy Gobert, but like I would picture a hooper as being someone a little more versatile. Like, I consider Draymond Green on like the threshold of hooper versus role player, but I think Draymond Green's like one of the best role players ever. And I think that perfecting his craft as a role player has made him into an all-star, a multi-time all-star.
I see. If you were to call Draymond Green a role player to his face, it'd get ugly. That's the thing.
I don't think I'm offended.
If you were to call Rashawn Holmes a role player, if you were to call like a Thaddeus Young a role player, yeah, they're role players. But if you got into a press conference with Draymond Green after the All-Star game and say, "Listen, you mastered your role as a role player. You're he'd say, who are you? What the hell do you do? You can't call me a role player." Listen, anyone making over $80 million, $100 million, in my opinion, that's a different tax bracket. They're not role players. They're getting paid for a reason, and the team is behind them for that reason.
I disagree. I don't think I'm insulting anybody by saying like.
But listen, Austin, at the end of the day, there's no way that you can call Rudy Gobert a role player and then tell me that Mike Conley is a skill player that deserves to be in the All-Star game. Because listen,
and Mike Conley,
what Mike Conley does is less impactful to winning for Utah than what Rudy Gobert does.
Okay, all right, we're done.
If you disagree with that, then you're just not watching Utah. If you tell me what Mike Conley does is more impactful to winning for Utah than Rudy Gobert, you're just not watching Utah. And here's my point, right? Should Devin Booker have been in the All-Star game over Mike Conley?
Yes.
Wait. Did I ask you Devin Booker instead of Mike Conley or Mike Conley instead of Booker? I don't remember. I honestly don't remember.
You said, should Devin Booker have been in the game instead of Conley?
Yes, right?
Yes.
What about DeMar DeRozan?
Yes.
Okay, both should have been in the All-Star game over Mike Conley, right?
Yeah, they put up better numbers.
Neither of them would have been in the All-Star game over Rudy Gobert. Neither one of them, regardless of position, neither one of them would have been in the All-Star game over Rudy Gobert.
I don't think it's an insult to call somebody a role player. I think you can be – there are role players that are like okay at like one or two things but are really good at one thing. There are some role players that are elite at exactly what you need them to do, and that elevates them into the all-star category because they master it.
They're not role players anymore. If they're elite at what they do, they're elite. They're not role players. Rudy, listen, I made a 10-minute case as to why Rudy Gobert isn't the defensive player of the year. He's overrated, in my opinion, defensively. But at the same time, he's one of the best paint protectors in the entire league. I'd argue, if not the best paint protector in the entire league. And what he does offensively, I mean, yeah, you can make fun of screen assists, but Utah's offense doesn't function the way it does without Rudy Gobert because he's one of the best screeners in the league. So you just throw him at the top of the key, make him draw contact. Now your ball handler has all that space because your 7'2" French center just got in the way and the defender can't get around him. So listen, you don't have to think he's a good player. You don't have to think he's deserving.
No, I think he's a very good player.
I'm not saying you. I'm just saying in anybody's case. You don't even have to like Rudy Gobert, but I just think it's insulting to call players role players. Like, I think if you play 15 or less minutes and your role is to specifically get in there and do one job, then you're a role player. But if you're a starter and you're getting paid like an all-star, if you're getting paid like a superstar, that's what you are. That's just the standard.
So is Tobias Harris a superstar?
Yeah, absolutely. I made a video on that a year ago.
That's right, you did.
I already told you he's a superstar.
All right, fair enough. What
are you going to call him, a role player?
No. He's very good at many things.
He's very good at many things. So in other words, you want to call him a role player, but you don't want to right now in front of him.
No.
I'm kidding.
No. I think he's not a role player. He's a step up. He's 2 to 3 steps above a role player. A role player Is not.
So let me ask you.
I don't define a role player by how much money they make. There are many guys in the game that are overrated and that are overpaid for what they do.
So
I consider a role player.
We'll conclude this debate. We'll conclude this debate with this, right? What is it that you think makes Rudy Gobert a role player?
Because he's not dynamic. He doesn't.
Okay, so tell me what Rudy Gobert does that makes him a role player as opposed to, I guess, a star.
A star first of all, a star has just the cachet of a star. Like they're stars.
All that aside, I'm talking straight hoops. Why is Rudy Gobert a role player?
Because he can't defend in space. He doesn't switch on anybody. He can't really credibly just defend more than one position. He's an elite rim protector with an offensive skill set that is just basically catering to 2 feet around the rim or lobs the rim. None of that is elevating a championship. It's not now he is elite at those 2 things that he does on either end of the court. And that has blossomed him into a star level player. But to sit here and tell me that he is a guy that is a true superstar, you put him on any team and that team's an automatic playoff berth, I think that's ridiculous.
And that's fine. I don't think anybody's disputing that, but I also think it's unfair to call him a role player. But that's just my opinion.
I don't think everybody on the team has a role.
So then wouldn't everybody be a role player?
In a sense, yeah, everyone is a role player.
Well, then this is stupid. This is stupid.
But I think
can't call Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert role players and then say different things for Julius Randle and Domantas Sabonis.
No. But I think the role of the role of Rudy Gobert is not to be the star. It's confined.
No, you know what? This is crazy, right? Because this is the Feet to Embiid podcast, and all we're supposed to be talking about is Sixers. And for the past 2-3 weeks, we've had to have these dumbass conversations about Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, and I don't feel like talking about either of them. I really don't. So let's move on. Let's talk about some Sixers ball.
Wait. Right there.
Listen, you can use Abe Link as your source right there, and I'm glad he's making you blush. But when push comes to shove, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not calling these guys role players. If you were to get in a presser and call Rudy Gobert or Draymond Green a role player, they give you shit for it. They give you an earful.
Well, I think they had to reassess what they define as a role player. Now we're going to talk about our sponsors, Thrive Fantasy. But before we do that, Brock, who did you pick to win the 3-point shootout?
Steph Curry, the chef.
So did I. Who did you pick to win the dunk contest?
The dunk contest, I didn't even pick anybody. I'm not going to lie. I didn't even pick anybody. I looked at that lineup, and I said, I don't even feel like watching this. But let's say I went with Cassius Stanley prior, just to help you out for the sake of the ad.
I picked Obi, so I took the L there too.
Okay.
My problem with the dunk contest is this: you have people like Josh Smith there, and people there that are judging it, and they're giving 8s and 9s. Some of their landmark ideas in their own dunk contests were I'm going to try to jump from the free throw line, and then they'd end up jumping from with a heel on it and not even actually doing the dunk right. So what it's just this is it's so repetitive. The dunk contest is a thing that should be done once every couple of years, but they shouldn't. The dunks get so repetitive, and the shelf life is far past. It's not fun anymore, I don't think.
I actually think what they should do is incorporate. You know how there's professional dunkers, some dudes that are 6'3", that can get up they're bouncing off a trampoline and do a flip and dunk. You've seen the guys at halftime at the Sixers games that use the trampolines, and there's street ballers that are professional dunkers, Jordan Kilganon. I think they should incorporate something like that, bring professional dunkers in, bring trampolines in, do something. If you can't give any incentive for the players to join the dunk contest, you either need to do away with it or you got to go bigger. I think you're right. There is a shelf life, so stuff does get old. And when guys like Aaron Gordon and Zach LaVine come around and they have battles, us as fans get a little spoiled. We want to see hoverboards and mascots come out. But ultimately, there's one basketball and one basket. So there's only so many different ways you can dunk and put the ball into the basket. Now, the officiating is just something people want to be mad at, right? Or the judging, I should say. It's like an NBA game. Everyone wants to be mad at the officials. They want to scapegoat the officials. In a dunk contest, everyone wants to be mad at the judges. Me personally, I don't care about that type of stuff. The outcome is what the outcome was. Yeah, Cassius Stanley probably got robbed because of how easy he made his first dunk look, going under the leg, off the leg. He jumped off of, and putting it in the basket on his first try. I mean, that was dirty. But ultimately, they got to do something to spice the dunk contest up if they just can't draw in big names to do it.
Yeah. All right, before we move on to the next segment, ARAM says, so being a star has nothing to do with being elite at your position if you're not popular. It has nothing to do with popularity either. Terry Rozier is arguably an all-star this year, and he is not popular. What?
Oh, man, Krell.
What?
That's hilarious that you told me that James Harden wasn't going to make the All-Star game in our last podcast, but you're going to tell me Terry Rozier is more deserving.
And I didn't include him on my list because is based on history. I thought maybe he'd be left off because of what happened with Houston.
Listen, bro.
Perfectly reasonable.
Let's talk Sixers ball. It's no more role player Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley conversation. Doesn't matter.
You're killing me now. You're killing me. You're just killing me.
What are you talking about? I just said let's move on.
Oh, my God. All right. We're going to talk about our friends over at Thrive Fantasy once I find the ad. Here it is. Come hashtag prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. They have eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. If it's the NFL, the season just ended, I know. But when the season comes back around, choose 10 out of the top 20 player prop options to build your lineup. NBA is in season. MLB is coming up on us in just a couple weeks. PGA, of course, and even esports. Choose 5 out of the 10 player prop options to build your lineup. Each prop has a fantasy point total associated with the over or under based on its likelihood to occur. The more points a selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Use promo code Simmons43. That's Simmons, the word 4, FOR, 3, number 3, Simmons43, when you sign up today, and you will receive an instant deposit match up to $50, $50 on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and hashtag prop up today. So, Brock, the second half of the season begins in a couple of days for the Sixers. Now, let's sort of reflect on how we got to this point. They are 24-12. They're first place in the East. The Nets trail by half a game despite not having Kevin Durant. And that's a great question. I would say give it a try. It can't hurt, right? Let's give it a try. Manuel, thanks so much for tuning in from outside of the U.S., by the way. Assuming you're outside of the U.S., because I don't know why I'd ask the question otherwise. But thank you for tuning in. We appreciate the support. So 24-12, half a game up on the Nets. Let's go through each player on the roster and give our grades of that player in the last 10-ish minutes or so. Before we do that, did you see the chat today? The Painted Lines chat? Do you ever check the chat?
Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to.
What's wrong with you?
I'm a busy dude, bro. Listen, I'm only on my phone to tweet. That's it.
But you never retweet the things that I tag you in.
Because I told you, I'm only on my phone to tweet. I tweet what I got to do, and I get the hell out of there. I'm back to the real world.
All right, fair enough. I received a text today from somebody who's I would say close to people in the Sixers organization, and he left it something simple. He just said, "Something's brewing." I'm thinking they got nationally televised games coming up. Got a big set a big thick schedule of some of the best competition they play this season coming up next couple of weeks. Wouldn't shock me if they pull a trade the next week or so. Wouldn't shock me. This is not me reporting. This is me guessing. I just have this gut feel it's going to be Kyle Lowry. I do.
So I was pretty skeptical, but I also kind of have a feeling that Kyle Lowry is a little more real than I realized. There are some obstacles because Miami does probably have more expendable assets than Philadelphia's in terms of heading to the championship. Philly probably wants to keep more than Miami does at the moment. But listen, Kyle Lowry is a plausible get. I mean, the only thing standing in the way of getting Kyle Lowry is that lingering contract extension, right? So he is on a 1-year, $30 million contract right now, but he wants an extension, and I believe he wants 2 years, $15 a year. So he'd be getting $30 million altogether. And in order for the Sixers to get Kyle Lowry, it would either have to be in a 3-team or they're going to have to give up Danny Green because that's the only player that can really make salary work. Danny Green's $15 million. But I honestly, Austin, I don't think Daryl Morey wants to mess with this roster too much. I don't think Doc does either. So when I look at it, Joel Embiid's not going anywhere. Ben Simmons isn't going anywhere. Tobias Harris isn't going anywhere, in my opinion. So there's 3 guys that are untouchable. Now, Seth Curry, I don't think the Sixers want to trade. If they have to, they probably will. But just in terms of floor spacing, I know he's been struggling since he came back from COVID, but in terms of floor spacing, there's not many players that warrant the gravity that he does around the league. So I think they're trying to keep Seth Curry. When you look at the bench unit, they're not getting rid of Dwight. They're probably not getting rid of Shake. So who's that leave? It's like Danny Green, Tyrese Maxey, Furkan Korkmaz. How much can you do with that?
I think it's going to be like a first-round pick or something, like a package of picks, Tyrese as the main pieces to attract it. But keep in mind, like you said Miami could be a competition. I think they're going to give Kyle Lowry the ability to say, like, you've done enough for us. Where do you want to go? And if he has that opportunity, Philly makes the better sense. I mean, let's just be honest here. Like, they're in a better spot right now in the East. There's there's a more, I would say, defined fit potentially in Philly, and I think if he's looking to win a championship, I mean, you can't look at the Heat and tell me that they're like closer at this moment in time than the Sixers.
A year ago you would have, but not this year. Definitely not this year. And the good thing, there is some silver lining. Toronto was the hottest team in ball, one of in the past month, but they're 17-19. They've got the 8th seed. There's 9 teams in the East with 17 or less wins compared to 6 in the West. So Toronto's still probably going to make the playoffs, but they've got Norm Powell and Fred VanVleet on multi-year contracts who both have more threes, free throw attempts, points than Lowry. And they have pretty much the same shooting numbers from the field and from 3 with Lowry on the floor compared to when he's off the floor. They're 6-1 this season in games without Lowry. So if Philadelphia can make the money work, it makes perfect sense. And in terms of on the court, Lowry's a brilliant defender. He's a bulldog. Defensively, he's tough. He can take charges. But offensively, yeah, he'll give you 17 a game. I like his playmaking more because a pick and roll with Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, with one of them as a screener, let's say Embiid rolls to the mid-range or Ben rolls to the basket, you're putting the ball into a 34-year-old point guard who's been in the league over a decade with some of the highest IQ knowledge in the game. So that P&R, it would be deadly. On court, it makes perfect sense. You just got to make the money work.
Yeah, and Marquise has Nets with Blake, LA getting Drummond potentially at their Embiid killed them. Here's my thing with like what you mentioned, like a great point. You mentioned Fred VanVleet. They just paid him big bucks. He's clearly the guy they're building around for the future. Lowry's expiring. There's not really a big role for him there anymore, and they're probably not going to give him the money that he wants. You might as well get something for him before he
sold his crib. I think he sold his $5.2 million crib in Toronto. He's
That's
from
right.
North Philly, and the Raptors said they want to grant him access to a team he wants to play for. which would be like the Clippers, Miami, or Philly. So if he's looking at championship window, it's the Clippers and Philly right now. It just depends on what Philly's going to do. The problem with the market is you've got to see how everything plays out because, like Marky alluded to, so you've got Blake going to Brooklyn now, right? You still have DeMarcus Cousins, an unsigned free agent who a team's definitely going to go after. You've got Nikola Vucevic in Orlando, who a lot of teams in the East are linked to. So if he gets traded, you also have to wonder what does Orlando do with Evan Fournier? What do they do with Terence Ross? So there's a rippling effect there. What happens with Drummond impacts the league because he's in Cleveland. So maybe Toronto trades for him. Maybe Lowry's involved in that trade. There's also Kevin Love who might get bought out. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in this trade market and this buyout market. But Kyle Lowry has been a name linked to Philadelphia for, I'd say, 2 months now? And listen, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah. I think the smoke's getting thicker and thicker and thicker. I mean, it's not – you usually don't hear like the big names that are in this business when they say like Lowry this, Lowry – they usually don't just like throw out names without reasoning behind it, even if they're saying I'm not reporting anything. But
so how do you feel about Blake to the Nets? I know we can't really give player grades out with only 4 minutes left.
So I guess
we might as well talk transactions.
It doesn't move the needle for me at all.
See, I don't think it's a needle mover, but I think people are – listen, Blake's numbers are horrific. He's been horrific this season. But I wouldn't be surprised if Blake comes out and starts dogging dudes for no reason. He's in a really good situation. He's not going to be the number one option. He's got a coaching staff full of guys that understand how to optimize players and specifically forwards offensively. So I wouldn't be surprised Blake comes out dogging dudes, putting up 15, 16 a night with 5 rebounds. And
we'll see.
Like a shell of himself, which is
has to prove it first. Brock, in the last 3 minutes, we're going to do player grades.
All right, so let's cram them in.
All right.
I did everything in school.
Daryl Morey.
With 3 minutes left. What'd you say?
Daryl Morey, go.
A+, 100% A+. He turned this roster around. He gave him space. He's probably going to make some more moves. A+.
I would say A+ as well. Doc Rivers.
A+. Doc Rivers and the whole staff. They're a combination for me. Popeye Jones, Dan Burke, Sam Cassell, A+ for everyone.
I would say A-. We'll do him. We'll do him service. Elton Brand.
Forgot he existed. No grade. Forgot he existed. He gets satisfactory. He's passing.
Fair enough.
Doesn't mean enough.
Joel Embiid.
A+. Most valuable player in the league. Most dominant player in the league.
I don't think there's a high enough representation for what he deserves. A+. That's the limit. A+ it is. Ben Simmons. B+.
Hesitantly a B+. It'll be an A by the end of the season. I'd like to give him an A, but that slow start hurt him a little bit. He's been developing that baby hook. He's up to 60% on hook shots, which is magnificent. He's been great in the post defensively. Ben is who Ben is. He's been fantastic from the line of late. So if we're looking at the past month, 2 months, A+. But if we're giving Embiid an A+ for the season, I've got to bump Ben's down a little bit. So I'll say B+ with some room to improve.
I'm going to say a B for Ben.
Okay.
B. Tobias.
B+.
I'm going to say
really, honestly, I could give Tobias an A. I could give Tobias an A. If you look at what Tobias has been for this team, he's been monumental. Countless games with 20 points on 50% shooting, more than Paul George, Luka, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Paul George, etc. So for Tobias, he's been fantastic. He's been hitting his spots. He's been a really reliable a really reliable guy. My apologies for the Sixers. And specifically in the fourth in OT, he's won Philly a few games, which is what Philly fans were clamoring for, a closer. So Tobias has been that guy for Philly, big in the clutch. I'll give him an A-.
Okay. I will give Tobias an A-. It would be an A+ if he were taking more threes. But there's that. Seth Curry.
Seth Curry got the COVID hangover, so I'm going to give him a C. He's right at average. He was really hot before he got COVID, and he's been a little different. That's not a superstition. Jason Tatum said the same thing. It's tough. Your body's got to recover. You got to get that stamina back. You got to get comfortable on the court again. And I'll use the I Am Athlete podcast in here to kind of draw a parallel. Cam Newton was on the I Am Athlete podcast, and they were saying, Cam, You are killing it in New England. You have 2 huge weeks in New England. The Patriots might be able to use you in their system. It might be a big year, and you get COVID. Now, what is that like, getting COVID right in the middle of the season, right when it starts? And he said it's like you're waiting at you're waiting at the gas station, right? You run in, you go give the guy, all right, give him a 20, say, put gas on pump 8, and let me grab these Skittles, right? You buy your shit, you give him the money, you come back out, and the car's gone. Your friends that were in the car waiting for you at the pump, they're gone. And that's what Cam equated COVID during a season to. It's like you're just thrown off. Physically, mentally, you're thrown off. So for Seth, I'll give him a C with a lot of room to improve. There's been games where he's been mad efficient, and I think he's going to be huge for Philly in the postseason. He can light it up for 22, 24, 26 a night on certain nights on really efficient shooting.
I will give Seth a B minus. I think he's been better with like handling a little bit and creating some, like that floater that he has. I just need the 3-point volume to go up. I need him to snap out of this little rut he's in. But I'll give him a B minus. Danny Green.
Danny Green, C as well. He's been average. There's nights when the Sixers only have 8, 10 attempts in the first half, 3-pointers, which to you, Austin, that's not enough. To me, I don't care if you take 10 threes, but if you take 10 threes and they're out of double teams, Joe's getting double bent, Tobias, they're getting doubled, you got to hit those threes at a high percentage. You need to hit 6, 7, 8 of those 10s. So until Danny Green either becomes a really consistent dead-eye shooter, the Sixers, they're not going to be able to capitalize as much on those double teams. He's been shooting good. He's been efficient. But Danny Green needs to shoot the ball more consistently, in my opinion.
I'll give him an A minus.
A minus. Wow. I mean, listen, he is one of 30 players with 35 plus steals and 15 plus blocks. So defensively, he's been all right on the perimeter. He's been getting bullied a bunch, but he's still been serviceable on the perimeter defensively.
Yeah, I think he's been really good from 3 for them for the most part, leading the team on attempts. I believe he's like shooting above 37%. I think his defense has been okay, but I will give him an A minus. I think he's been just about what they've needed out of him. Go over to Shake Milton.
That's tough because Shake was hurt. He's starting to look like himself again. If Shake can give you 12 to 15 a night, that's just what you need off the bench. Excuse me. But Shake Milton, before he got hurt, I'd say A. After, he's probably around a B minus. With Shake, he's not really shooting the 3 ball as much as he did a year prior, but he's got a couple of games with 3 or more 3-pointers in the past 2 weeks. So if he can just come out and give you 12 to 16 a night, he's huge for Philadelphia.
I'll give Shake a B, too. Furkan Korkmaz.
Furkan Korkmaz, man. I'm going to give Furkan Korkmaz a D. It's just very tough for me to watch Korkmaz. He's a very unesthetically pleasing basketball player. He's 6'7" with some bunnies. He doesn't get to the rim a whole lot. He is a playmaker, and Doc trusts him as a playmaker. He plays point guard for his team overseas, but he's just not giving me enough. He's not giving me enough as a playmaker, and there was a stretch of games where Philly went on a road trip where he was shooting like, I think 33% or less from the field with less than 5 threes. He had more turnovers than he did makes from the field, which you can't have out of your 8th or 9th man. Those games are won when teams take their starters off and the bench comes on the floor because they got to either hold leads or expand them. And Philadelphia couldn't do that in the time when Shake wasn't playing, largely because there was just no production offensively. And that comes down to Furkan a little bit.
I'll give him a D+. I need him to capitalize on more open threes. I need him to make free throws. It's the most infuriating thing that he misses open threes and he is not a reliable guy from the free throw line. Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard, man, I'm saying A. I love what Dwight's brought. I think he's brought a huge presence in the locker room and on the bench. He's been massive for that Sixers team and lifting spirits up and keeping guys level-headed. He's a championship-winning player, so I'd argue him and Danny Green have things tight in that locker room with Doc and his staff. But in terms of Dwight's production on the court, I mean, top 3 in rotation players for offensive rebounds and total rebounds. I think he's top 5 in total blocks. So he's been doing his job. Just come in, catch those lobs, defensively be a rim protector, move around, set screens, draw contact. And you really couldn't have asked him to do any better of a job than he's done already. So I'll say A for Dwight.
Isaiah Joe.
Isaiah Joe and Tyrese Maxey, I can't even give grades. They just haven't played enough ball for me to give grades. They're at the back end of this rotation. I like what I've seen out of Isaiah Joe. He's a capable defender. He's a good three-point shooter, but right now he just hasn't grown into his body. He's not strong enough, but his shot's there. His ball handling is there a little bit. He can move real well off ball and defensively. Like I said, he could hold his own, but he's going to be a different player if he adds 5, 6, 8 pounds of muscle, and we're going to see what he can do with the G League. Shout out Justin and everybody with the G League right now because they're having a good year for content. I mean, B-Ball Paul and those Delaware Bluecoats are giving these guys over at the Paint the Lines a lot of content. Of content. They're balling out.
For sure. Matisse Thybulle.
Matisse Thybulle, I'm going to say B. Defensively, there's very few players that are more impactful than Thybulle in the league, and this is with limited minutes. If Thybulle had any semblance of an offensive game, he would be a starter. If he could shoot the ball 4 or 5 times a game from 3 and make it at 38, 40%, he'd be a starter on any team just because he's that good defensively. So I'll give Matisse a B because he's been reliable on the defensive end. He's been big in a lot of games. He has 2 steals in over 8 games this season. He's been able to lock down certain guys, and he's been massive in that Philly 2-3 zone. But offensively, he's still a project. I'm not sure how much upside he has offensively, but I'll give him a B. And maybe that changes by the end of the season if he adds a little bit on that end.
All right. I'll give mine for Tyrese. I will say A- for Tyrese. I've been really, 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 really impressed with his desire to go to the rim and go hard, even if he's not getting foul calls. Super, super speedy ball handler, gives him a spark off the bench. The jump shot will come with time. But I've really been impressed with what I've seen from him. Isaiah Joe, I'll give a B. I think he's been effective when he's gotten minutes. Obviously has to develop a lot more, but I think he's been effective thus far, given where he was drafted and given the situation with his team. I like it. For Matisse, I will say B+. Again, if he had any kind of offensive game, like cutting off ball, any kind of instincts there, I would probably be an A-, but he's just terrible offensively, and his defense is just superb. I will give him a B+. Let's go to Vincent Poirier and Tony Bradley.
You can't be serious, dog. You can't be serious, dog. What am I supposed to grade them on? How good they look sitting on the bench as the 11th and 12th man?
I will say Vincent Poirier, Vinny P, NA, can't be graded. Tony Bradley, I think, has been solid. I'll give him a B-.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. There's no grading scale. I can't grade him based on anything. I mean, Tony Bradley's played 30 minutes altogether in the season. Vinny P really hasn't seen the floor at all, so there's not much for me to grade him on. I just want to answer this quick question. The answer Goat asked me, Brock, you like Tyrese Maxey at the draft. Has he made you like his future more or else so far? Now, with Maxey, I mean, listen, he hasn't played a lot of ball. He's been in Doc's doghouse, and I think rightfully so. Now, on the road trip, it was obvious. Maxey is a fearless bucket getter. He can score at all 3 levels occasionally, but more importantly, he's a fearless bucket getter. So you can use him in the 2-man game. He can get downhill, takes it right into his chest. He can lower his shoulder. So Maxey offensively, I think there's a ton of upside there. But much like Joe, I think Maxey needs to grow into his body a little more. And once he gets comfortable in his own skin and his own body, he bulks up a little more, he's going to be real impactful. And I think Maxey is a super high ceiling. I think Maxey, I comped him to De'Aaron Fox. I still think his ceiling is that high. Offensively, he's got such a nice game where anything around the paint, if it's a floater, if it's a layup, he can score. He could get a bucket there. So the three-point shot needs work. The mechanics might need work a little bit, but he just hasn't played enough. And I think the situation really dictates that. If he's not in Philadelphia, if he's in a different situation like in New York or somewhere like that, he might play more. He'd definitely play more, and he'd be in contention for Rookie of the Year. But in Philadelphia, where there's already 2 ball handlers and Ben Simmons and Shake Milton, and there's a lot of guys that need their buckets like Embiid, like Tobias Harris, like Seth Curry, it's just tough to get him involved. So I think his ceiling is really high. But I think if he was on a different team, we'd be speaking about him a lot more differently. It'd be more positive. It'd be in the Rookie of the Year race, but it'd be a lot differently. That's why I think Philly might have to part ways with him. I think Maxey showed a lot that other teams like would have interest in.
All right, last 2. Terence Ferguson and Mike Scott.
I can't grade Terence Ferguson. Not much there. Mike Scott, I'll give Mike Scott a B. I'll give him that for his game against Utah. He had 4s across the board. I think it was a career high, either a career high or a season high in steals with 4. He was a dog that game, made a couple of 3s. So for that big game against Utah, I'll give Mike Scott a B. Again, both of them really haven't played enough.
I'll give him a B. Brock, where can they find you?
On Twitter, at Landis Brock. On YouTube, Brock Landis is just my name. And like I said, I have a care package coming out by Thursday. Trade and buyout candidates for Philadelphia. We didn't get to everyone tonight, so if you want to know who I think the Sixers should target and might end up with, check that video out and the Ben Simmons video. Ben Simmons comps to Scottie Pippen, Magic, Rajon, etc. All
right. You can find him on Twitter at Landis Brock. You can find me on Twitter at NBA Krell. I'm the beat reporter for the Sixers. So you can always find me on Twitter reporting stuff and getting out new pieces of work that I'm working on. You can find us on YouTube at Brock Landis and at the Painted Lines. Same place on Instagram. Well, for me, it's _Austin Krell _ For Brock, I don't even know what his Instagram is.
I have one. 0dark30. I told you, I'm on my phone to tweet my nonsense, and then I'm out of there.
Fair enough. Brock is the GOAT. As always, we do appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to find us on SoundCloud, subscribe, Apple Pod, subscribe, review, and rate and review. There we go. Subscribe, rate, and review. And we always appreciate it. Marky, you can find our Twitter handles right on the screen at NBA Krell, at Landis Brock. That's us. We always appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, take care, everybody. Have a good night. And Brock,
stay solid, baby.
There we go. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.